Welcome to Washington today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, January 7th, 2026. An Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent shoots and kills a woman in a vehicle in Minneapolis during an immigration-related operation. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says the agent was acting in self-defense against an act of domestic terrorism. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey says that is BS. The shooting was a reckless abuse of power, and ICE needs to get the F out of his city. Minnesota Governor Walz says that protesters should stay peaceful and not riot, and we can't give them what they want. He has also put the Minnesota National Guard on alert. Also today, U.S. House Oversight and Reform Committee holds a hearing on the alleged widespread fraud involving publicly funded welfare programs in Minnesota. The United States seizes 2 oil tankers with Venezuelan oil, 1 Russian-flagged. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth brief House members and senators on U.S. policy toward Venezuela now that President Nicolas Maduro is in a U.S. prison awaiting trial. Secretary Rubio also asked about Greenland after the White House said that President Trump is discussing options for acquiring the island territory and not ruling out potential use of military force. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. unveils new dietary guidelines encouraging Americans to eat more whole foods and protein and fewer highly processed foods and added sugar. And the U.S. House advances bills to restore the expired Affordable Care Act health insurance premium enhanced subsidies and a package of the remaining fiscal year 2026 spending bills to avoid another government shutdown at the end of the month. Department of Homeland Security writing on X today, ICE officers in Minneapolis were conducting targeted operations when rioters began blocking ICE officers, and one of these violent rioters weaponized her vehicle, attempting to run over our law enforcement officers in an attempt to kill them, an act of domestic terrorism. An ICE officer, fearing for his life, the lives of his fellow law enforcement, and the safety of the public, fired defensive shots. He used his training and saved his own life and that of his fellow officers. The alleged perpetrator was hit and is deceased. The ICE officers who were hurt are expected to make full recoveries. This is the direct consequence of constant attacks and demonization of our officers by sanctuary politicians who fuel and encourage rampant assaults on our law enforcement, who are facing 1,300% increase in assaults against them and an 8,000% increase in death threats. This is an evolving situation. We will give the public more information as soon as it becomes available. That was the post from the Department of Homeland Security. Minnesota Governor Walz, a Democrat, quote, tweeted and wrote, "I've seen the video. Don't believe this propaganda machine. The state will ensure there is a full, fair, and expeditious investigation to ensure accountability and justice." And Governor Walz spoke at a news conference in the afternoon.
This morning we learned that an ICE officer shot and killed someone in Minneapolis. My deepest condolences to the family, to the loved ones who had to learn about this tragic event on national television. We have been warning for weeks that the Trump administration's dangerous, sensationalized operations are a threat to our public safety, that someone was going to get hurt. Just yesterday, I said exactly that. What we're seeing is the consequences of governance designed to generate fear, headlines, and conflict. It's governing by reality TV, and today that recklessness cost someone their life. I've reached out to Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, and I'm waiting to hear back. Let me be clear, Donald Trump and his administration may not care much about Minnesota. That's been pretty evident, but we love this state. We won't let them tear us apart. We'll not turn against each other. To Minnesotans, I say this: I feel your anger. I'm angry. They want a show. We can't give it to them. We cannot. If you protest and express your First Amendment rights, please do so peacefully, as you always do. We can't give them what they want. The hearts and minds of the people in this state are on our side. To Americans, I ask you this: please stand with Minneapolis. To Minnesotans, know that our administration is going to stop at nothing to seek accountability and justice. The State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension are working on the investigation. We have activated the State Emergency Operations Center. State Patrol and Minnesota National Guard leadership is connected with the Minneapolis Police Department, the St. Paul Police Department, Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, the DNR, and Minnesota's Homeland Security and Emergency Management. We have activated dozens of members of the State Patrol's mobile response team. And from here on, I have a very simple message. We do not need any further help from the federal government. To Donald Trump and Kristi, Noem, you've done enough. There's nothing more important than Minnesotan safety. I've issued a warning order to prepare the Minnesota National Guard. We have soldiers in training and prepared to be deployed if necessary. I remind you, a warning order is a heads up for folks. And these National Guard troops are our National Guard troops. They're teachers in your community, they're business owners, they're construction professionals. They are Minnesotans. Minnesota will not allow our community to be used as a prop in a national political fight. We will not take the bait. We will continue to update you, Minnesota, as we get more information.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat, holding a news conference in Minneapolis. The Minneapolis Star-Tribune writing, several residents of the area who witnessed the scene said agents were ordering the woman out of the vehicle. A video posted on social media showed the vehicle reversing before accelerating toward an agent as he fired rounds at close range. Also, the Star-Tribune writing, the woman shot and killed by an ICE agent in Minneapolis on Wednesday, January 7th, was identified by her mother as Renee Nicole Good, 37 years old. Donna Granger told the Tribune that her daughter lived in the Twin Cities with her partner. Granger declined to say whether she lived in Minneapolis. Granger said the family was notified of the death late Wednesday morning. That's so stupid that she was killed, Granger said after learning of the circumstances from a reporter. She was probably terrified. She said her daughter is not part of anything like that at all, referring to protesters challenging ICE agents. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, a Democrat, also held a news conference today and said he does not believe the Homeland Security Department's version of what happened.
To ICE, get the f*** out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite. People are being hurt. Families are being ripped apart. Long-term Minneapolis residents that have contributed so greatly to our city, to our culture, to our economy are being terrorized, and now somebody is dead. That's on you. And it's also on you to leave. It's on you to make sure that further damage, further loss of life and injury is not done. We're going to be working towards justice as quickly as we possibly can right now, and justice is what we've all got to get. Next, a message to our community. Look, we all know that the agenda of this Trump administration is to create chaos. Let us respond right now with our best versions of self. This is a moment where all of us in Minneapolis and beyond, we can rise to the occasion. We can show them who we are. We can show them the kind of courage, bravery, love, and compassion that makes Minneapolis, Minneapolis, and that makes America, America. We are better than a bunch of ICE agents being deployed to cities around the country and ripping apart families and communities. We're better than that. And so we are going to meet that hate with love.
Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, a Democrat, at a news conference today in his city. The U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was asked about the deadly shooting involving ICE agents in Minneapolis as she held a news conference on the U.S.-Mexico border in Brownsville, Texas.
Do you have any comment on what's happening with the shooting in Minneapolis? You didn't mention it earlier. I was wondering, out of the 2,000 deployed there, are they including the newly hired ICE agents, or are diversions still happening from FBI, Border Patrol, DEA, and HSI?
So a couple of questions there. You asked about a shooting that we just had in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was an act of domestic terrorism. What happened was our ICE officers were out in an enforcement action. They got stuck in the snow because of the adverse weather that is in Minneapolis. They were attempting to push out their vehicle, and a woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over and ram them with her vehicle. An officer of ours acted quickly and defensively shot to protect himself and the people around him. And my understanding is that she was hit and is deceased. We're continuing to gather more information, but this goes to show the assaults that our ICE officers and our law enforcement are under every single day. These vehicle rammings are domestic acts of terrorism. We're working with the Department of Justice to prosecute them as such. We will continue to protect our ICE officers and in cooperation with other law enforcement agencies as well. You've seen me in the last couple of days deploy over 2,000 more officers to the Minneapolis area. And in the last 2 days, we've arrested hundreds and hundreds of dangerous criminals, not just fraudsters who stole from the American people billions of dollars and put it in their pockets and enriched their friends from overseas and themselves, but also individuals who committed acts of murder and rape and trafficking and drug exploitation and child exploitation. So we're going to continue to do our work. And I want to remind everybody that the act like we saw today of using a vehicle to try to kill an officer and his colleagues and the other people around him is something that every politician, every elected official, everyone in this country should be able to rally around and say that it is wrong. And that sanctuary cities and sanctuary states that protect individuals who do that should no longer be allowed. That those individuals that are in leadership positions in these sanctuary jurisdictions need to work with us to make sure that every single person that's out there enforcing the law can be safe, but also so that all of our citizens can continue to be safe too. Domestic acts of terrorism like this will not stand, and I'm grateful that we have the leadership in Washington, D.C. that recognizes it, and will make sure that it's working to keep every single community safe, regardless of who's in charge in that city. President Trump gets up every day and will work to keep people safe, whether they're in a red state or a blue state or in a city that has a Republican mayor or a mayor that has a Democrat mayor. He's going to fight for every single American to make sure they live in a safe community and can raise their kids without fear.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem at a news conference today in Brownsville, Texas, on the U.S.-Mexico border. She was there to meet with Customs and Border Protection officers and local ranchers and talk about new technology to secure the border. President Donald Trump writing, "I have just viewed the clip of the event which took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is a horrible thing to watch. The woman screaming was obviously a professional agitator, and the woman driving the car was very disorderly, obstructing and resisting, who then violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer who seems to have shot her in self-defense." Part of the post today on Truth Social from President Donald Trump. This is Washington Today. Minneapolis Public Radio writing that Minnesota's reckoning with social services program fraud landed before Congress on Wednesday in a hearing where Republicans accused Democratic Governor Tim Walz of being complicit or unresponsive. Democrats labeled it a political exercise that ignores President Donald Trump's pardons of convicted fraudsters. The hearing, which featured testimony from 3 Minnesota Republican legislators, comes days after Walz dropped his bid for a third term with a pledge to focus intensely on fraud in his final year. It also follows the Trump administration's actions to freeze billions of dollars in aid for welfare, child care, and health care assistance to Minnesota and other Democratic-led states. That was from the Minneapolis Public Radio website. The hearing was held by the U.S. House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Here is the House Majority Whip, Tom Emmer, Republican of Minnesota, questioning those 3 Minnesota representatives, Marion Rarick, Kristen Robbins, and Walter Hudson.
Based on what you've learned, Representative, over the last several years, do you have any doubt that Governor Tim Walz knew about this fraud as it was occurring?
He absolutely knew that it was occurring.
Thank you. The Housing Stability Services Program was estimated to cost about $2.6 million per year, but before it was shut down last October, it was on track to run about $122 million in 2025. In fact, I think they sucked $161 million out of it from the point it started in 2020 until it was finally shut down. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, and Joe Thompson believes that 90% of that was fraud.
Yeah. The Quality Leering Center, as uncovered by Nick Shirley, received almost $10 million in funding. Is that accurate?
I believe it is.
There are more than 80 autism centers in Minnesota under investigation. Is that true?
I believe it is, yes.
It's clear that someone is criminally complicit. You can't just let this amount of money get out of your administration over a period of 7 years without knowing. There was a hearing in the state regarding the fraudulent housing stabilization program, but before that hearing, Governor Walz fired the official who was slated to testify so that they could not testify and expose what was happening under Governor Walz's watch. Has Governor Walz or Attorney General Ellison fired anyone else to your knowledge, Representative?
Not to my knowledge, and that was Eric Rumdahl, and his administration believes that he he was not fired, but I say he was fired because it was too convenient.
Right. Representative Hudson, is it true that 90% of the individuals charged, regardless of what your colleague on the panel just said with his facts and figures, 90% of the individuals charged or indicted with the $250 million Feeding Our Future COVID fraud are of Somali descent?
I believe that to be correct.
Are you aware that in a 2021 video, Mr. Ellison promised that he would obstruct his own agencies in their investigation of Somali fraud?
I am very much aware of that.
It's no wonder that criminals in the Somali community felt they were free to steal taxpayer dollars. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Marion. Do you have any doubt that Tim Walz knew about this fraud as it was occurring?
None whatsoever.
Walz and Ellison were protecting fraudsters instead of investigating them, and it was purposeful. And it's no coincidence that this is occurring largely in the Somali community. Walz made a sanctuary state, Minnesota, a sanctuary state. He gave free health care, free college, and free licenses to illegals. And Walz looked the other way when Somali immigrants were stealing. Representative Robbins, do you have any doubt that Tim Walz knew about this fraud as it was occurring?
None whatsoever.
So all three of you have no doubt in your minds that Tim Walz knew about the $9 billion of fraud during his tenure as governor and did nothing about it.
The House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, Republican from Minnesota, questioning 3 Minnesota state representatives, all Republicans, Marion Rarick, Kristen Robbins, and Walter Hudson at today's Oversight and Government Reform Committee hearing in Washington. Fox News writing a major state audit in Minnesota conducted by the nonpartisan Office of the Legislative Auditor found widespread failures and internal control problems in the Department of Human Services Behavioral Health Administration grant program, reaffirming concerns about massive fraud issues. The report released on Monday found that between July 1st, 2022 and December 31st, 2024, DHS dished out more than $425 million in grants to 830 organizations, the majority being non-governmental, and did not show proper oversight in watching over those taxpayer funds, which in many cases were meant to help those with addiction and mental health issues. That article from Fox News. More from today's hearing. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Democrat of Texas, took part of her time to question the witnesses about the estimated 100,000 Somali and Somali Americans in Minnesota, the largest such population in the United States.
Do you believe that all Somalis are engaged in fraud?
I do not, and I'd like to...
Okay, just yes or no. Next.
Of course not.
Oh, absolutely not. We have good Somali people in our state.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to make sure I level set because it seems like we want to continue to, especially as we just heard those particular articles entered into the record, we want to continue to just make it seem as if you are Somali, then somehow you are a fraudster. And this administration has decided that it wants a target on their backs. And so when my colleague, Ms. Randall, decided that she wanted to talk about the threats that are being made towards various Somali people, the reason she brought it up is because this particular side of the aisle has a tendency of if one person does something bad, especially if they are an immigrant, then we are going to cast aside that entire community. So I wanted to level set, and I appreciate your honesty because that's something that we very rarely get from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle.
Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Democrat of Texas, at today's House Oversight and Government Reform Committee hearing. Congressman Robert Garcia, Democrat of California, who is the ranking member on the committee, said at the hearing that fraud happened in both Democratic and Republican-led states, and he also pointed to examples of individuals convicted of large-scale fraud of public programs who have received pardons.
Wherever fraud exists, we should take it on, and we should hold folks accountable. And when people commit fraud and people get hurt, there's going to be repercussions, as there should be. We can all agree to that. We want to hold fraudsters accountable. We want to protect the victims and innocent people so that those that can access services can continue to access services across this country. That's how it should work. But we also know that's not how it should work according to President Trump. Now, let's actually talk about real fraud and some fraudsters. Now, we all know that recently, here in Florida, President Trump granted a get-out-of-jail-free pardon to Philip S. Forms. Now, Mr. S. Forms is a nursing home mogul convicted of schemes to defraud Medicare and Medicaid of $1.3 billion. Where is that hearing? This guy just didn't steal from taxpayers. He took advantage of thousands of people, admitting them to nursing homes and living facilities that could not help them. His network of doctors gave out dangerous and harmful treatments and prescribing opioids to drug addicts just to make more money. In 2019, when S-Forms was sentenced, Trump's own DOJ issued a press release that quoted that the man behind one of the biggest healthcare frauds in history will be spending 20 years in prison. 20 years in prison, the DOJ said. Just 14 months later, Donald Trump let him walk free with a pardon. In October of this year, on his 56th birthday, S-Forms was arrested on domestic violence charges. Let's look at another case, another Trump case. Joseph Schwartz, he was sentenced for taking advantage of nursing home residents and workers and defrauding the government of $38 million. Where is that hearing? Schwartz paid lobbyists almost $1 million to secure a pardon from the president, and it worked. In November of this last year, a full and unconditional pardon was granted by President Trump for this enormous amount of fraud. Now let's look at Paul Walzak, a tax cheat whose crimes cost taxpayers almost $1.1 billion, dwarfing what we're talking about today, as he made lavish purchases like a $1 million luxury yacht. Now, Mr. Walzak was supposed to spend 18 months in prison, a fraudster who we want to go after. He should have been held accountable for his crimes. And he was supposed to pay $4.4 million back to the taxpayers. While this pardon application was pending, his mom was invited to a $1 million per person candlelight dinner at Mar-a-Lago with President Trump. She attended, and less than 3 weeks later, her son received a full and unconditional pardon.
Congressman Robert Garcia, Democratic California ranking member on the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, at today's hearing looking at the alleged fraud in Minnesota. You can find the full hearing at our video library at cspan.org. And the committee chair, James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, has invited Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, both Democrats, to testify on this issue before the committee in February. This is Washington Today. CBS News reporting the latest on Venezuela and Greenland. The U.S. seized a Venezuela-linked sanctioned oil tanker in the North Atlantic and a tanker in the Caribbean Sea on Wednesday, the latest seizures since beginning the campaign against Venezuela in early September. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said after a Trump administration briefing for senators that the U.S. has tremendous leverage over Venezuela and will control the proceeds from the sale of millions of barrels of oil to help stabilize the country. Democrats are pushing for a vote this week to limit future military action in the South American country after a surprise U.S. operation led to the capture of its now former president, Nicolas Maduro, who was in a Brooklyn jail cell awaiting trial. And Mr. Trump's sights remain set on Greenland, with the White House saying it's open to a range of options for the U.S. to take over the Arctic island, including military force, part of an expansionist strategy the president has called the Dunn Road Doctrine. That was all from CBS News. Here's Secretary Marco Rubio speaking with reporters in the U.S. Capitol building after that classified briefing for the senators.
Well, there's a lot of operational details that can't be discussed publicly, obviously, for obvious reasons. So as we move forward, we'll describe our process, which is a threefold process in Venezuela. I've described it to them now. Step one is the stabilization of the country. We don't want it descending into chaos. Part of that stabilization, and the reason why we understand and believe that we have the strongest leverage possible, is our quarantine. As you've seen today, 2 more ships were seized. We are in the midst right now and, in fact, about to execute on a deal to take all the oil. They have oil that is stuck in Venezuela. They can't move it because of our quarantine and because it's sanctioned. We are going to take between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil. We're going to sell it in the marketplace at market rates, not at the discounts Venezuela was getting. That money will then be handled in such a way that we will control how it is dispersed in a way that benefits the Venezuelan people, not corruption, not the regime. So we have a lot of leverage to move on the stabilization front. The second phase will be a phase that we call recovery, and that is ensuring that American, Western, and other companies have access to the Venezuelan market in a way that's fair. Also, at the same time, begin to create the process of reconciliation nationally within Venezuela so that the opposition forces can be amnestied and released and from prisons or brought back to the country and begin to rebuild civil society. And then the third phase, of course, will be one of transition. Some of this will overlap, I've described this to them in great detail. We'll have more detail in the days to follow. But we feel like we're moving forward here in a very positive way.
How long will this take, Secretary?
Some senators who were in that briefing describing your operation variously as that you're winging it, that there's no plan for Venezuela going forward.
Yeah, I know. They're going to say that. I used to be a senator too. That's what you always say when it's the other party. The bottom line is we've gone into great detail with them about the planning. We've described it to them. In fact, it's not just winging it. It's not just saying or speculating it's going to happen. It's already happening. Like the oil arrangement that we've made with PDVSA on their sanctioned oil that they can't move. Understand, they are not generating any revenue from their oil right now. They can't move it unless we allow it to move because we have sanctions, because we're enforcing those sanctions. This is tremendous leverage. We are exercising it in a positive way. The president described it last night. Secretary will have more to say on it today, who is involved in running this portfolio. And we feel very positive that not only will that generate revenue that will be used to the benefit of the Venezuelan people, and we're ensured that that's what the case is, but it also gives us an amount of leverage and influence and control over how this process moves forward.
Mr.
Secretary, on Denmark, sir. Mr. Secretary, on Denmark. Why has the administration not taken Denmark's offer to discuss the situation in Greenland? And
well, I'll be meeting with them next week.
But will you take military intervention off the table?
I'm not here to talk about Denmark or military intervention. I'll be meeting with them next week. We'll have those conversations with them then. And but I'm not having anything further to add to that today.
Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers? Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland? Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland? Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers this week?
Well, that's always been the president's intent from the very beginning. He said it very early on. I mean, this is not new. He talked about it in his first term, and he's not the first U.S. president that has examined or looked at how could we acquire Greenland. There's an interest there. But so I just reminded them of the fact that not only did Truman want to do it, but President Trump's been talking about this since his first term.
The White House put out a statement last night saying that the military option is on the table.
Lost a lot of weight.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. They said the military option is on the table. So is the administration really willing to risk the NATO alliance by potentially moving ahead with military operations?
What I think the White House said yesterday is what I will tell you now, and I've always said. The president always retained the option. Every president, not this president, every president always retains the option. I'm not talking about Greenland. I'm just talking about globally. If the president identifies a threat to the national security of the United States, every president retains the option to address it through military means. As a diplomat, which is what I am now, and what we work on, we always prefer to settle it in different ways. That included in Venezuela. We tried repeatedly to reach an outcome here that did not involve having to go in and grab an indicted drug trafficker. Those were unsuccessful, unfortunately.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio answering reporters' questions after the classified briefing for senators today on Capitol Hill on Venezuela and some questions about Greenland. Standing beside the Secretary, the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. More from the CBS News article. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright said Wednesday that Washington will control sales of Venezuelan oil indefinitely. He said, we're going to market the crude coming out of Venezuela. First, this backed up stored oil, and then indefinitely going forward, we will sell the production that comes out of Venezuela into the marketplace. He spoke at a Goldman Sachs energy event in Miami. Wright also suggested sanctions on the country's oil sector would be waived to facilitate the export of its oil. That was from CBS News. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, and Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat of Virginia, also spoke with reporters after today's briefing from the Trump administration officials.
Tim and I made it clear that the public needs answers. Across America, people are just saying, what the hell is going on? We need answers as to how long this is going to last. We need answers to how many troops, how much money. Are there guardrails, things we don't do? And a number of things that we talked about were very troubling. I am totally dissatisfied about their answers of going into other countries, totally dissatisfied of what they might be doing in Greenland, as well as in Colombia, Mexico, and other countries. And we're also totally dissatisfied about succession. They're relying to help them run Venezuela, help Trump run Venezuela, of the most unreliable, corrupt people who hate America. So this is fraught with peril. The American people, the public, not just in a classified room, the American people need answers. Tim.
And I'll just say this, and we've got the two cabinet secretaries here, and they heard what I said in that room. We are 4 months into a sustained military operation. More than 200, quote, enemies have been killed. American troops have been injured. We have the U.S. forces arrayed around Venezuela, but neither the House nor the Senate have been willing to hold a single public hearing to put these facts before the public. Why not? We need to start doing our job. What they will do is get us in a classified setting where the leader of the Senate says, this is not for public consumption. And so the questions that we have about the legal rationale, we cannot discuss in public. The questions we have about the strategic rationale, we cannot discuss in public. About the targeting criteria, we cannot discuss in public. About what's next, is Greenland next, is Colombia or Mexico or Cuba next, it's very hard to discuss in public. We've got to get this discussion out of the skiff and into the public before it's too late.
The reason we need hearings, public hearings, is the Founding Fathers, when they gave the Congress the power to make war, knew that this is such a powerful and fraught with peril issue, making war, that a public discussion was required. They're avoiding all public discussion. To talk to us in the skiff, where we didn't get adequate answers even to our questions, but not let the American people know what they're doing, when it's the American people who have always paid the price when we try to do this regime change in blood and treasure. We need answers. We need answers to these questions, and we need them made publicly. Thank you.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, joined by Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat of Virginia, outside the classified briefing with Trump administration officials on Venezuela and on Greenland. Number of senators came out. Here is Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican of Oklahoma.
What did you hear in the briefing?
Yeah, first of all, I'm not going to talk about anything that was classified there, so no operational. This is an outstanding coordinated effort by from the intelligence community, to our men and women in uniform. Only the United States can pull this off. And, this is something that should have taken place probably in a previous administration, but only President Trump had the backbone to pull it off, to pull out an indicted illegitimate president that was holding Venezuela hostage. And so glad this took place.
Are you worried about the oil tanker and what's happened this morning?
Let me go here first.
Are you worried about what's happened with an oil tanker this morning and the Russian response?
No, absolutely not. We're going to control our Western Hemisphere. This is the emphasis that President Trump has put in it. There is not going to be any oil coming in or out of Venezuela without our approval. Yes.
Senator Mullen, go ahead. I wanted to ask about the reporting that we saw that Secretary Rubio had told lawmakers that President Trump wants to purchase Greenland. Can you tell us anything about that at all?
We didn't talk about that in this meeting. I'll keep our. There was no mention of Greenland.
Senator Mullen, can you talk about the plan going forward? Do you feel confident that the administration has the necessary plan in place for what could happen after Maduro's?
Absolutely. This was a coordinated effort with months of planning, understanding the contingency plans, the main plan, what happens going in to bring Maduro and his wife to justice, and then what happens with Venezuela moving forward. What we want to do is give the best opportunity for the Venezuelan people to take back their country and put it back in the democracy that they lost 25 years ago. And there is a full plan, full effort. If any Democrat comes to this mic and tells you anything different, obviously I'm not going to get in the details, but they are absolutely lying about it, because there was a full, complete brief. I would say probably one of the best briefs I've ever received since I've been in Congress.
Do you think there could be elections there soon, and how soon could they be?
I think that'll take some time because the infrastructure hasn't been in place for 25 years, but that's ultimately our goal.
Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican from Oklahoma, speaking to reporters today after the classified briefing with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and other Trump administration officials about Venezuela. Reuters writes that Russia said on Wednesday that the U.S. seizure of a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the Atlantic was a violation of maritime law, and a senior lawmaker described it as outright piracy. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at a White House news conference said the U.S. had seized a second, quote, stateless oil tanker. She said it was operating as part of Venezuela's dark fleet. U.S. military operations in Venezuela and the Trump administration's position on Greenland came up today in London during Prime Minister's question time in the British House of Commons. Here are questions from Ed Davey, head of the Lib Dems, Liberal Democrats, to Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who leads the Labour Party.
Mr. Speaker, Jeffrey Robertson, KC, is a respected authority on international law. He's also the head of the Prime Minister's barrister chambers. And he couldn't be clearer. President Trump's actions in Venezuela are illegal. He says the United States, and I quote, is in breach of the United Nations Charter and has committed the crime of aggression, which the court at Nuremberg described as the supreme crime. Does the Prime Minister agree with his old mentor, or has he got it wrong?
Well, there's plenty of things that Jeffrey and I have agreed on and disagree with over the years, but let me set out our position. It is our long-standing position that Maduro was not a legitimate president in Venezuela. And so nobody, I think, sheds any tears at his removal. And what we need, what we were saying before the weekend, and we say again, is there needs to be a peaceful transition to democracy in Venezuela. Now, the benchmark of all actions of all countries is, of course, international law, and it is for the US to justify its actions accordingly. My focus is on the defence and security of the United Kingdom, and yesterday we were working with NATO allies, including the US, on security guarantees for Ukraine. And it's only with security guarantees that we'll have a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, which is vitally important for Ukraine, for Europe, and for the United Kingdom.
Sir Ed Davey. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister just looks ridiculous when he won't tell the truth that Trump has broken international law. But turning to Donald Trump's next target, the Prime Minister was right to give the Danish Prime Minister his backing over Trump's threats to annex Greenland, and I welcome his joint statement with other European leaders. But does he also agree that if Trump does attack Greenland, it will be the end of NATO? And given that frightening possibility, does he accept that the UK needs to increase defence spending more quickly than currently planned and build new alliances with reliable nations?
Mr. Speaker, let me be. The Greenland issue is obviously very, very important. I thank him for raising it. The future of Greenland is for Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark, and for Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. And yesterday, he will have seen that I put out a statement to that effect, along with fellow allies in Europe. And of course, NATO is hugely important, the single most effective and important military alliance the world has ever known. He keeps encouraging me to sort of tug away at parts of NATO and to choose between Europe and the US. That would be a strategic mistake for our country.
The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer responding to questions from Member of Parliament Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, during Prime Minister's Question Time in the House of Commons in London today. President Donald Trump writing today on Truth Social, Russia and China have zero fear of NATO without the United States, and I doubt NATO would be there for us if we really needed them. Everyone is lucky that I rebuilt our military in my first term and continue to do so. We will always be there for NATO, even if they won't be there for us. And the Shreveport Times in Louisiana writing that U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson will travel to London January 20th to address the United Kingdom Parliament. Johnson's office said it's the first time a sitting American House Speaker has addressed Parliament. His appearance is tied to America's 250th celebration after winning its independence from England during the Revolutionary War. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea. It's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Washington Post writing the Trump administration released new dietary guidelines Wednesday that call for Americans to limit highly processed foods, such as those high in added sugars and sodium, and that endorse products that had once been discouraged by many nutritionists, such as whole milk, butter, and red meat. Recommendations emphasize eating whole foods such as fruits and vegetables in their original forms, and foods rich in protein and whole grains. They call for avoiding packaged, prepared, or other ready-to-eat foods that are salty or sweet, such as many chips, candies, and cookies, as well as staying away from sugar-sweetened beverages like sodas, fruit drinks, and energy drinks, and some artificial sweeteners. That was from the Washington Post. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. spoke in the White House briefing room.
These guidelines replace corporate-driven assumptions with common-sense goals and gold standard scientific integrity. These new guidelines will revolutionize our nation's food culture and make America healthy again. For decades, Americans have grown sicker while healthcare costs have soared. The reason is clear. The hard truth is that our government has been lying to us to protect corporate profit-taking, telling us that these food-like substances were beneficial to public health. Federal policy promoted and subsidized highly processed foods and refined carbohydrates and turned a blind eye to the disastrous consequences. Today, the lies stop. The new guidelines recognize that whole, nutrient-dense food is the most effective path to better health and lower healthcare costs. Protein and healthy fats are essential and were wrongly discouraged in prior dietary guidelines. We are ending the war on saturated fats. Diets rich in vegetables and fruits reduce disease risk more effectively than many drugs. Whole grains outperform refined carbohydrates. Added sugars, especially sugar-sweetened beverages, drive metabolic disease, and today our government declares war on added sugar. Highly processed foods loaded with additives, added sugar, and excess salt damage health and should be avoided. As Secretary of Health and Human Services, my message is clear: eat real food. Nothing matters more for healthcare outcomes, economic productivity, military readiness, and fiscal stability. The dietary guidelines shape dozens of federal feeding programs, including Head Start. These standards affect 45 million school lunches every day, meals for 1.3 million active duty service members, and food served to 9 million veterans in VA hospitals. Today begins the work of aligning those programs with affordable, whole, nutrient-dense food.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the White House briefing room. The American Medical Association president said in a statement the guidelines affirm that food is medicine and offer clear direction patients and physicians can use to improve health. New York Times writing, the American Heart Association issued a lukewarm statement in support for the new guidelines, voicing concern that they could lead people to consume too much saturated fat and sodium. Guidelines also recommend that Americans should consume less alcohol for better overall health. Previous guidelines said that Americans should not drink or drink in moderation. Recommended limits were 2 drinks or less per day for men and 1 drink or less per day for women on days when alcohol is consumed. Dr. Mehmet Oz, administrator of CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, answered a question at today's briefing about the new guidelines.
One of the changes that was made had to do with alcohol. Secretary Kennedy or Dr. Oz, could you explain the science behind the new language on not saying 2 drinks for men and 1 drink for a woman every day would be healthy, and whether or not the industry had an impact on the language of moderation versus just saying alcohol is not healthy and you shouldn't drink it?
So alcohol is a social lubricant that brings people together. In the best case scenario, I don't think you should drink alcohol, but it does allow people an excuse to bond and socialize, and there's probably nothing healthier than having a good time with friends in a safe way. If you look at the blue zones, for example, around the world where people live the longest, alcohol is sometimes part of their diet. Again, small amounts, taken very judiciously, and usually in a celebratory fashion. So there is alcohol on these dietary guidelines, but the implication is don't have it for breakfast. Right, this should be something done in a small amount with hopefully some kind of an event that might have alcohol added. But the general move away from 2 glasses of men, 1 glass of women, there was never really good data to support that quantity of alcohol consumption. That data was probably primarily confused with broader data about social connectiveness.
Dr. Mehmet Oz, CMS administrator at today's White House news conference on the new dietary guidelines. The Hill writing about the announcement. The guidelines are represented with an upside-down pyramid, placing vegetables, fruits, proteins, dairy, and healthy fats at the top and whole grains at the bottom. The initial food pyramid was introduced in the 1990s, showing a small amount of sugars at the top, recommending 2 to 4 servings of dairy, meat, fruit, and vegetables in the middle, and 8 to 12 servings of bread, rice, pasta, and other grains at the bottom. And it was updated to My Plate under the Obama administration. That was part of the article at The Hill. Political Rights, a bipartisan Senate group, is nearing an agreement to revive lapsed Obamacare subsidies, with a key negotiator saying the group could release draft legislation early next week. The deal being discussed by the senators could reestablish the enhanced tax credits that expired January 1st for 2 years, with new restrictions including minimum premium payments and income caps. Developing agreement would pair that with the new cost-sharing reduction measures and expanding access to health savings accounts. Senator Bernie Moreno, Republican of Ohio, tells Politico that legislative text could be finalized realistically probably Monday. The cost of health care and other goods was on the mind of Congressman Pete Aguilar, Democrat of California, the House Democratic Caucus chair, at a news conference today after a House Democratic Caucus meeting.
We're here today because the American people have been clear for more than a year. They need us to lower costs, and they need us to do it now. But instead, Donald Trump has been breaking his promises to the hardworking Americans who put him in office. Remember when he promised to lower costs on day one? What did he do instead? He gave pardons to 1,500 violent criminals who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. He promised to always put Americans first, but this week he is focused more on Venezuela than he is on the United States. And that's saying something, because he is not focused on the priorities of Americans. He promised to lower health care costs, but instead his single legislative accomplishment was cutting $1 trillion from health care in the big ugly law, the largest cut in health care in American history. But Democrats aren't losing sight of what the American people want in this moment. We're working tirelessly to deliver real solutions to the table that will make America more affordable and prevent healthcare costs from going up. This week, House Republicans will have a choice if they want to join with us, if they want to work with us on our mission for working people in driving down the cost of healthcare. Even though Speaker Johnson tried everything he could to prevent Democrats' discharge petition from extending the Affordable Care Act tax credit from getting a vote, we succeeded. Republicans may have already let these health care subsidies expire, but they have an opportunity to right the wrong of their leadership. Millions of Americans are counting on Congress in this moment. We need just a handful of Republicans to join with us. I'm confident that we will get this done for the American people, because failure is not an option.
Congressman Pete Aguilar, a Democrat from California, at a news conference this morning. He is chair of the House Democratic Caucus, and the House has voted successfully to pass the discharge petition on the rule governing the bill that would extend the expired Affordable Care Act enhanced premium subsidies. House Republicans also held a meeting this morning of their conference members, and then leadership held a news conference. The House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, Republican of Louisiana, spoke about their economic agenda, including health care reform. This follows Tuesday's meeting at the Kennedy Center with President Donald Trump, part of the House Republican Conference Retreat.
President Trump was fully engaged with our members yesterday, as he has been this entire first year. He's not even a full year in office, and yet we have seen an incredibly engaged president who is working with a Republican House and Senate and Congress to fight for the American people who had been left behind by the previous administration. We talked about what we can do to keep lowering costs in areas like energy, where in many states are now finally seeing less than $2 a gallon gasoline. That's more money in the pockets of families. Working on lowering health care costs, where Democrats only want to give money to big insurance companies. President Trump talked about letting families have the decision on how to spend that money. Not the insurance companies, but families controlling where the money goes, and if they can get a better plan for themselves and their family, they should be able to make those decisions. as he's done other things to lower prescription drug prices. We're going to keep working on those ideas. We had all of our committee chairmen talking about all the things that are going to be teed up, things that are already coming through committee, lowering housing costs, so many other things that we're going to be doing. And then every member was able to give their input. And members gave a lot of really good input on looking at an agenda that's going to be continued to focus on lowering costs for families and getting this country back on track as we celebrate 250 years of American independence. It's something to be proud of. But democracy is not easy. Democracy takes work. It takes engagement from the public. As we go into an election next, November, later this year, the country needs to stay engaged in fighting for the kind of reforms that we've been able to deliver so that we can keep doing what it takes to get this country back on track. We are excited about this opportunity.
House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, Republican from Louisiana, at a news conference this morning with other House Republican leaders. House today also advanced a bipartisan package of fiscal year 2026 spending bills that would fund the Departments of Commerce and Justice and Science agencies, the Department of Energy and Water Development, and the Department of Interior, Environmental Protection Agency, and other related agencies. They've passed the rule which governs floor debate, and the leaders hope the bill can pass the House and Senate and be signed into law by President Trump by the end of this month to avoid another government shutdown. At this morning's House Republican Leadership News Conference, Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, spoke about the three-bill package.
This week, the House is going to advance, as you heard, the next set of the FY26 appropriations bills. We're going to continue our strides to restore regular order around here and get back to the appropriations process. We're not totally there yet on the full, what you would fully call regular order, but my, have we pushed this boulder up that hill. And it's been quite an effort, as you know. Since I became Speaker 2 years and 3 months ago or so, I started talking about this, the urgency, the necessity of us getting Congress back to work the way it's supposed to. And we've made big strides in that now. And so this week, as you know, we're going to advance energy and water, commerce, justice, science, and the interior environment appropriations bills, 3 more in that package. We have plans to do the next 3 next week, and then we'll continue. And I want to say, this is bipartisan effort. You got both parties working on this, and that's to be applauded. Our appropriators worked very hard through the Christmas holiday to have these bills prepared on our return. They worked through the holiday, and my team, all of us, we worked. We didn't take any time off to make sure this would happen, and we're grateful for all that work. These 3 bills spend less than if we had advanced another continuing resolution. They deliver critical priorities for House Republicans' districts, and they continue to advance President Trump's America First agenda. With just 3 weeks to go until the funding deadline, we're very hopeful, very bullish that this package of bills is going to continue our good momentum towards completing annual appropriations with regular order without a bloated, wasteful omnibus spending bill. And I'll close with that and take your questions. But I told the House Republicans just now, I said, don't lose sight of this great Christmas blessing. We did not have a Christmas omnibus nightmare situation for 3 years in a row now. Why? Because Republicans take our responsibility seriously.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, at a news conference today with other House Republican leaders. Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Democrat from Connecticut, ranking member on the Appropriations Committee, expressed support for this spending package during Tuesday night's Rules Committee meeting.
We set out 3 goals when we began this process. We sought to protect funding for democratic priorities, reject any poison pill provisions, and reassert Congress's power of the purse. I'm proud to report that this package accomplishes all 3 of these goals. And as my colleague pointed out, we do provide the funding for community projects and congressionally directed spending. And that's for both Republican members and Democratic members. This bill makes meaningful investments to bring down energy costs, rising utility bills, which are central drivers of the affordable crisis. It's probably one of the biggest issues, increase utility costs for families today. It increases funding for electrical grid infrastructure by $375 million. It adds over $3 million for the Weatherization Assistance Program, which helps low-income households improve the energy efficiency of their homes, saving participants $372 per year on average. At a time when families are being squeezed for every penny they have, these savings matter more than ever. Despite the Trump administration's crusade against clean energy, the bill provides more than $3 billion for energy efficiency and renewable energy programs, rejecting the White House's attempts to cut this funding by over $2 billion. As the climate crisis increases the frequency and force of severe storms, this bill increases funding for the Army Corps of Engineers by nearly $2 billion, supporting projects that strengthen our water infrastructure, improve climate resilience, and protect our communities from natural disasters. The bill also increases funding for violence against women, the Violence Against Women grants by $7 million, providing crucial resources for victims of abuse who otherwise would have nowhere to turn. It protects our nation's national parks and public lands, denying attempts to expand oil and gas leasing and weaken protections for endangered species. It provides nearly $9 billion for the EPA, almost doubling the funding for environmental protection that the White House sought in this bill. Another highlight is protecting scientists whose livelihoods and cutting-edge research have been threatened by an administration that wants to limit funding to cover the indirect costs of research, shifting the financial burden onto individual scientists for work that benefits the public as a whole.
Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Democrat of Connecticut, ranking member on the Appropriations Committee at the Rules Committee meeting Tuesday night. And the Rules Committee approved a resolution to provide for House floor debate of the spending bill package. The House passed that resolution today, setting up debate and votes expected on Thursday. President Donald Trump, writing on Truth Social, after long and difficult negotiations with senators, congressmen, secretaries, and other political representatives, I have determined that for the good of our country, especially in these very troubled and dangerous times, our military budget for the year 2027 should not be $1 trillion, but rather $1.5 trillion. This will allow us to build the dream military that we have long been entitled to, and more importantly, that will keep us safe and secure regardless of foe. Further on in the post, he talks about paying for it with tariff revenue. Also, Reuters writing that President Donald Trump said on Wednesday he would not permit dividends or stock buybacks for defense companies until they fix problems with the production of military equipment. He wrote, defense companies are not producing our great military equipment rapidly enough, and once produced, not maintaining it properly or quickly. Trump also called executive pay packages in the defense industry exorbitant and unjustifiable. Reporting from Reuters. Wall Street today, the Dow down 466, NASDAQ up 37, S&P down 23. And from CNBC, private sector job creation turned positive in December, though at a bit softer pace than expected. Payroll processing firm ADP reported Wednesday companies added 41,000 hires for the month, a reversal from the loss of 29,000 in November. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Remember that C-SPAN now available on YouTube TV. Current and new subscribers can get C-SPAN, C-SPAN 2, and C-SPAN 3. Find out more at tv.youtube.com. And for the latest on what's going on in Washington, sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter, word for word, at cspan.org. Have a good night.